Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. Well, the Cambridge Dictionary defines trailblazer as the first person to do something or go somewhere where it shows that it is possible for other people to too. Well, I think our guest today needs to legally change her middle name to Trailblazer. I'm delighted to be joined by LAFD Deputy Chief Kristin Crowley. So nice to have you
Thank
here.
you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. So, with that introduction, you are the first woman fire marshal for the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. Obviously, a huge responsibility, a huge honor, but also something that reflects the opportunities for others. What does that say to other young women?
Sure. So I think that really says sky's the limit, honestly. If you work hard and you set yourself up for success, try to find some mentors out there, but really be thoughtful and strategic in how you approach your career. Really, the sky's the limit. So I'm there. That's kind of the steps that I've taken in the past, and I think if anything, if you can see it, you can be it kind of a thing, and that's why I'm so grateful and thoughtful about bringing other women up right behind me.
All right, well, but we also need to add, and this is very exciting, that you're sort of sitting in two chairs at this moment. You are currently acting Chief Deputy of Administrative Operations with the intent of taking that position once the current deputy retires. That's the third person in terms of hierarchy with the LAFD. And then again, you get to wear the mantle of first woman to be in that position. What does that feel like?
Right. So it's really exciting. And when people ask me that, so what's the motivation? The motivation is really to have more influence on the decisions that are being made at a very high level. And that's what's always kind of motivated me throughout my career, is to make sure that as I kind of move up, and I've been very thoughtful, like I said, about all of the different promotions, I wanted to come up through all of the ranks. So being identified as the next Chief Deputy in charge of our administrative operations, that was a goal, but in between the time, literally I've taken almost every single step. Started off as a firefighter, paramedic, engineer, fire inspector, Captain 1, Captain 2, Battalion Chief, Assistant Chief, Deputy Chief, and now Chief Deputy.
And how long have you been with the department?
Coming up on 22 years.
Wow, that's still a remarkable trajectory. It couldn't have been easy because one would think that, given everything that you've done and the time period that you've done it, you've had to go through some challenges and hurdles. So what have you faced and how did you face it? And has it changed for women in the department?
Sure. So there's always challenges. I think there's challenges for women and men, especially in the fire service. It's a very unique environment. A lot of it lands on whether or not you are capable of doing the job, you have the credibility and the character to do the job. So for me to kind of set myself up for success, but also just to kind of lead the way for men and women on the job, it was like I wanted to make sure that I was literally comfortable in my skin before I moved on. But I also kind of set myself up for, once I'm comfortable and I feel like, okay, I understand the job, I can make good decisions, it's time to move. It's time to grow. It's time to promote. It's time to set up for the next step. So I was really thoughtful and strategic in my assignments, had a really good balance of the field side of running 911 calls and having all those different ranks, but also having the balance on the administrative side. So, and those are called special duty positions within the fire department. And then each step, I wanted to learn a different area of the department so that, again, I could make really good decisions as I moved up the chain of command.
Did you have to stand up for yourself a lot, or did you feel that you were automatically receiving the kind of awareness and respect that you deserved?
Right. No, there's nothing automatic about anything.
Okay.
I think that's anywhere, in any
Right.
career, but the fire service is very unique. It's obviously male-dominated. There's only just over about 3.5% women on the LAFD. So I get that asked often. I was like, well, how is it being a woman on the LAFD, especially, or just in the fire service as a whole? And my experience is, the eyes are on you. They're on you a little bit longer. And that was my experience. Once I got to the position where I could prove that I could do this job and do it very well, and maybe even have to do it better, it was like, okay, all right, you know, she's okay, she can do the job. I think men also have to do the same thing, but I think that just the difference is, like I said, the eyes are on you a little bit longer.
Yeah, I'm going to take away the maybe had to do a little bit better part. I'm going to say had to. All right, well, I want to talk about your specific responsibilities, et cetera, but I do want to also, because you were not planning this. You were not that young woman that says, I want to grow up and be a fire person. You're that person that says, I want to be an orthopedic surgeon. You didn't go that way. What was it that drew you into the fire academy?
Right. So really, yes, a very different journey of how I got here. You hit it. I was pre-med in college. I was a student athlete, played two sports in college, and always had the competitive drive, but also knew I wanted to have a career, like I said, as an orthopedic surgeon. I always had a very big interest in medicine, and so when I graduated, I'd never been exposed to the fire service before. I moved out here from Green Bay, Wisconsin. I'm a Midwest person. Wisconsin.
You got it in there.
It came out, and it could come out when I wanted to. But, you know, I was headed to medical school. I took the MCAT, started to apply to medical schools, and I was like, you know what, even though I have my degree, I wasn't licensed to do anything in the medical field, so I thought, well, what can I do in between the time? So just always kind of wanted to set myself up for success. So I did the EMT paramedic thing, and I ended up doing my internship with LA City at Fire Station 89 in North Hollywood. And I'm telling you, it took me less than 5 minutes when I stepped into the fire station. It was just, this is it. And I hadn't even run a call yet as a paramedic intern. So that was my first experience. I did my write-outs and got my paramedic license. I thought, okay, this is really, I need to think about this. It was really a crossroads. It's like, do I continue to down the path of medical school, or do I start testing with fire departments? And it was as competitive. There were 16,000 people that took the test that I took to get hired by LA City back in 1998. We were at the convention center, and 16,000 people took that written. So I happened to get hired out of the first 50, and the rest that's my story.
You've had some, as in your role of fire marshal, you've also had some, you know, hands-on understanding of what it means to prepare for an emergency, as well as, you know, inspecting, you know, organizations, et cetera. Because you received a letter of commendation because you really helped in terms of the Woolsey fire. I mean, you were there. You saw it. You saved lives and homes, et cetera. And you weren't even on duty at that moment. That must have been something that probably informs how you think about things from this moment on.
Right, it does, absolutely. That experience, it's interesting. People ask about that. It's like you just get into automatic mode. We have family that live up there, went up there originally to help evacuate. And by the time we got the rest of the community out in the area where the house was, the fire crested the hill. So we fell back on our training. We trained very hard on our department in regards to the actual brush firefighting, so fell back on that, but we used garden hoses and buckets and just jumped from house to house and put out spot fires and moved a lot of the flammable materials away from the house that ended up burning. There's about 9 or 10 houses in that neighborhood that we just jumped back and forth and helped protect that whole neighborhood. We lost one structure. There was no water to that house. Otherwise, I think we could have saved that one too. But just the experiences from being a firefighter with LA City, just fell on that. But you talked about the balance of, you know, being at an incident like that and just going to automatic mode. But the second half of that, or actually the first half of that, I should say, is the preparedness. And part of being a fire marshal under my command is our brush clearance unit. And I cannot tell you how important brush clearance is, just to have a defensible space between where the fire runs up. I saw it with my own eyes at the Woolsey. People who had brush clearance, it slowed it down enough so just with garden hoses we could protect those structures. The places that didn't have that, or maybe had some combustible materials up against the house, you know, those had a tendency to burn. So just seeing it from both lenses of how important it is on the preparedness piece, is just so important. Plus, if you do have fire engines in the area, they can really do a fantastic job of protecting the structure with a defensible space.
Yeah, because you said brush clearance, but when you said combustible items, that wouldn't have even been something that maybe even the average citizen wouldn't think about, because they know that they have to, pull the dead brush away from the home, but making sure those things aren't around too. You also took over this position, and there was a backlog of inspections in the fire marshal's office. How important are these inspections, and where are we now with these inspections? Were we able to catch up to all the inspections and make sure that these urban areas are safe as well?
Sure, yes. So just stepping into the fire marshal's position, we just had to come along and have a really strong strategy. But the key to that was bringing our inspectors along in regard to helping us put that strategy together. Staffing is always an issue across the board, whether you're a public or private entity, but staffing is always really important. We've fought really hard to get additional positions, and that's assisted us. We've had a lot of support from the mayor's office and city council. So each year we're always looking to bolster up our staffing model, but just being more strategic in our approach and how our inspectors came in, and I made it really simple. We're going to build the strategy from the ground up, but also more importantly, we need to make sure we give our people the training, the tools, and the technology to do their jobs. And that's what we focused on the last 4 years, and today we're in a much better position.
So how big is your part of the department?
Sure. So the Fire Prevention Bureau, we have 250 people. We have about 50 civilian employees as well as 200 inspectors. In my current role as the acting chief deputy, there's just over 500 people under my command. So as a fire marshal, it's one bureau, but as the chief deputy, I've got 4 bureaus in a section under my command.
It's such a complicated city in so many different ways, and I've had the opportunity to speak to PIOs and Chief Terrazas, et cetera. How is it possible to keep all of this organized? Because you're talking about language barriers, you're talking about different environments, you're talking about issues that may or may not come seasonally, whether it be a drought or whether it be a pandemic, for heaven's sakes. How difficult is the whole city of Los Angeles when it comes to fire?
It's very challenging.
Yes.
You look across the 465 square miles within the city, and like all the layers that you just talked about, whether it's brush, whether it's down on the harbor, whether it's a high-rise fire, a big commercial fire, and you look at the LAFD, 106 fire stations, 3,500 plus firefighters, and we train every single day to be able to respond when you call 911, whether it's a medical emergency or a fire incident or a brush fire or just a simple public assist to help an elderly person back into bed. We're prepared to address any need of the community, and that's something I think for our organization to be proud of. It's something for us to be proud of our firefighters. I think we really each and every day strive to provide the best service possible to the city.
Where are your priorities as a leader? Where do you see yourself different from other people who have been in the positions that you are now responsible for?
I don't know if it's different. I may just bring in a unique perspective and a unique leadership style. I've just always put my people first. Always, and it just literally pays dividends for the right reasons. If you can motivate your people, increase their job satisfaction, motivation, and performance, wow, the sky's the limit in regard to what our people are able to do. So that I think is just, I don't know if that's a unique thing that I bring to the table, but that's been my style throughout my entire career, whether I was in an informal leadership role or a formal leadership role. I've always put my people first and try to give them the support that they need to do their jobs.
Is there a conduit to you? Do you make it easy for you to be accessible to those that might have an issue?
I think it's just, I think it kind of comes natural to me. I think people feel that I'm very approachable, but I also have a hard and fast line. And it's
don't mess with you.
Well, it's clearly communicated, but I think it's also, you make it about your people and supporting them. And like I said, it's really amazing what our people are able to do. 1,500 calls a day in addition to close to 600 transports a day with people who go to the hospital. So we do that every single day on top of responding to perhaps brush fires inside the city or outside of the city. and then we're still showing up at every single call and doing a great job.
And there are unusual things that have taken place literally in the last 18 months. And this is not an original question, and I'm sure that I've asked this of absolutely everybody who has a position of leadership in this city. The pandemic. The pandemic brought a whole new set of rules, a whole new set of problems, a whole new set of needs. Where did you fit into that puzzle?
Sure, yeah. Who would, we're literally sitting here talking about a pandemic in our lifetime. I oftentimes just really reflect back on that, and here we are living it. We as a department, as a city, as the United States, as the world, and how this has impacted us. So in regard to how we responded, again, couldn't be prouder of our organization. We were able to pivot, and that's what I think is really fantastic about what the fire department, especially LA City Fire Department, is able to do. We have our primary mission each and every day, and we respond to those calls just time after time after time and provide that optimal service. But then when we're called upon for a different mission, we're so mission driven that you need us to do what? Okay, boom. And we put together a plan, we follow up with a plan, and then we're off and running. So you talk about the pandemic, well, literally within even the fire department, we created and had to come up with a testing plan immediately. Then nobody really knew, like, well, how do we test and how are we going to set that up? Where in the city? We had fire inspectors, we had special duty members, we had on and off duty firefighters in all different ranks staffing these testing sites all over the city. And then it came to vaccinations. We pivoted again, came up with a vaccination plan. We've vaccinated over, I don't know the exact number, I think it's about 1.5 million people within the city, and we're still on that mission, and we're still running 1,500 calls, transporting 600 patients to the hospital, and doing all this other missions.
Were you able to continue with inspections during the pandemic?
We did, but we had to kind of figure out our way as we were working through it. So the immediate need was the testing. So we did shift our staffing because everything else was closed. There was we couldn't get into the businesses, we couldn't get into the schools, we couldn't get into the high rises. So it was actually a really good way to readapt and reuse our inspectors and other personnel that we kind of had to shut off our training. So we used people from training, we used people, our firefighters from recruitment, we used people, we still were running our drill towers, but we figured out a way to utilize our staffing and then not negatively impact our still ability to answer 911 calls. So that's what we ended up doing with our staff. So the inspections did close down to a certain degree, but then as things started to open up, we had to pivot and then kind of split our staff and figure out a way that we still are responsible to do our annual inspections. We're still responsible to go out and perhaps do spot checks on problematic areas, and our inspectors were doing both. They work after hours, they would work on weekends, and we would just figure out a way even to utilize all of our personnel that may not be working a 24-hour shift. People, our members stepped up and had to adjust to the new mission, and they're still doing it.
And also figure out what's safe with the businesses moving. Perhaps all the restaurants immediately made me think of it. You know, restaurants moving into parking spaces, or restaurants moving into, you know, parking lots and outdoor dining and everything. You had to sort of establish what is a safety protocol there, I would imagine.
We did, and we worked really closely with all the other city entities, because it's not just, we're one very important piece when it comes to public safety and fire life safety systems, but it's also, it impacts street services, it impacts all these other departments, building and safety. So we came together and had a lot of dialogue in regard to how we're going to do this, and how we're going to, and most importantly, how we're going to do this and how we're going to do it safely. So we had a lot of dialogue with all the other city entities, and again figured out a way to do it safely, but yet still meet another mission of, well, how do we start opening up these businesses if they can't be inside and they're going to use an outside patio or sidewalk or whatever it may be, and then figure out a way to do that safely as well.
All right, so now what's the worst thing somebody can do when it comes to, you know, just on a very personal level? I mean, I'm going to immediately think, make sure that you have to smoke alarms, et cetera. But what are something that maybe a person wouldn't think of the same way I didn't think of combustible items for a brush fire scenario?
I think just globally is have a plan.
Have a plan.
Yeah, have a plan. Whether you're working in a high rise, whether you're at home and you have small kids, or have a family plan if something does happen. Well, it's a pandemic, but earthquake and brush fires and all the things that can happen, to make sure that you have a plan. especially if you're in a higher risk area. You need to have a plan and understand how you can get out safely, how you can have all the important documents, your medicines, and all the things so you can get ready, set, and go. We may give you an order, say, hey, it's safe to stay in shelter in place, but when we say go, go. A lot of people don't think about the impacts, as if you leave late, the impacts of our responding resources getting up to a problematic area. Again, whether that's a brush fire or some other type of natural disaster, it can impact our ability to get up to where we need to go. So that, if anything, is really important, that the community has a plan so that if something, and they're called upon and they need to get out, that they're ready to go and can get out safely.
This is unfair of me to ask, but I'm going to take the word plan and ask you about your plan. Because I was looking at what obviously you have an enormous amount of responsibilities as fire marshal, but, the responsibilities of this, where you're sitting in as the acting chief deputy of administrative operations, and then the opportunity as time progresses to be in that seat. This is a really scary list of things that you will be responsible for. Do you have a plan, or are you just absorb it now, learn it, and get a comprehensive understanding of it?
Yeah, it's kind of both of those things all at once, right? You have to come in with a general idea of where you want your mission to go. But that's the vision, right, of where you need more from a global perspective. But where the rubber meets the road is, as I'm stepping into this position, I've already met with all the bureau commanders. I'm starting to do meet and greets, and so people understand who I am.
You are.
And how, it's not who I am, but more importantly, how can I support you? And so that's been my plan the last couple of weeks, and I'm just getting acclimated at this point. But it's like doing a needs assessment. But it's the needs assessment from my perspective, but the needs assessment, more importantly, from all of my bureau commanders as well, all the way down the chain of command. So that's what we're in the process of doing as we speak.
Because you, also represent the fire chief in a lot of, I would imagine that there's a lot of information that has to be exchanged between the two of you. I am going to ask, and it's going to become tiresome, but it's a mantle you're going to have to wear, of being a woman in these first positions. And so are you hoping that it'll get to the point in which that isn't even a subject anymore, that we don't have to say the first woman, the first woman, the first woman, the first woman, or a woman at all, that it's just, this is this person in this role, and this is what they're doing?
I think that's where we want to be in the future, but our reality is a reality, meaning, okay, I'm the first woman in this position, and then you get in the position of like, okay, this is what she brings, this is what this person brings to the table, this is the skill set, the qualifications, the experience that they're bringing. The woman thing, I can't get out of my skin, so it is what it is, right? Mm-hmm. So that's honestly how I've taken in this, through my entire career. There's been a lot of firsts in just other positions, or just the first at this particular station that might have been the toughest truck house in the city. So I'm used to it at this point, and I think that it's just part of what this whole plan is. But you're absolutely right, you're spot on. We as a community want to get to the point where you look at the person for their skill set and what they're bringing to the table, not necessarily about their gender. I want to talk about what I can bring,
job is,
and what the influence and impacts, versus, well, I have a unique perspective because I'm a woman. Absolutely, I think that makes the team stronger. But ultimately, you want to get to the place of, okay, this person is going to help us make better decisions and make us a better organization to better serve the community of LA.
You mentor.
Yeah.
You're part of a lot of mentorship programs. Mm-hmm. So what is the draw for that?
Oh, the draw is, you get to the point in your career where it's like, absolutely, you got to pay it back. I've had men mentors, I've had women mentors, not a lot of women, but I have had some guidance throughout my career, and thank goodness. But it's now that I'm in this position, it motivates me even more. It's just reach out. It's just getting people comfortable. It's like the higher up you get, the less they feel like that they can even approach you. But the reality is I push. It's like, no, I'm here for you. And that's for the guys and the gals on the job and even outside the organization. The youth development programs, I was a big part of that in the past. And oh, what an amazing thing to be a part of. We're part of the youth fire academies. And just to see the growth of these young men and women in a 6 to 8 week program is just so motivating. So that's one piece of it. It's outside of the department, but internally, you know, we've got a big turnover within the next 2 years. We've got a major amount of people that are going to be leaving the LAFD. So it's really, talk about a succession plan. We better be leaning forward and be thinking about that. And we are, and that's the good news. But the mentorship is such an important piece so that people understand how to set themselves up for success, but to gain the experience that they need. It ultimately comes down to making good decisions.
All right, well, this is a perfect platform for you. So why should someone consider the LAFD if they are a young person looking toward a future, whether they be a man or a woman?
Right, so the LAFD is really unique. We're one of the largest departments in the city. And I used to run our recruitment unit as a captain, and that was my spiel. It's like, okay, why come to the LAFD? So I could talk to you for about an hour for that, but okay. I'll be short. I talk about the sky's the limit. There's a true advantage of going to a larger department, and could be some disadvantages being so large, because sometimes you can feel like you're getting lost in the mix. But we have so much to offer, you know, versus a smaller department. There's not a lot of room to grow. There's not a lot of different positions. If you have an interest in being a scuba diver, guess what? On the LAFD, you could be one of our divers. If you have a passion and you want to fly helicopters, guess what? We have a bunch of those, right? There's sky's the limit. Even from all the different types of ranks that we have on this organization, the promotability within the department, every 2 years, if you're eligible, you can compete. It's a competition, don't get me wrong, but the ladder and the career ladder is amazing within our department because there's so many opportunities because we have so many positions. And I think, honestly, just the amount of calls and the sets and reps that we get, the amount of calls, and you just get to the point where you're not, I can honestly say I'm never comfortable at anything, but that's a good thing because you know there's always room to grow. But when you go on a 911 call, it's never the same. So if you want to do something that you're constantly going to be challenged, both physically and mentally, the LAFD, the types of calls, you'll be on a brush fire for 21 days straight, or you could work a 24-hour shift and go home and be with your family for 24 hours. So it's just, there's so many things that you can do on this department.
When's the last time you went out on a truck to a call?
Last time was, well, when I was a battalion chief in Battalion 13. So it's been a little bit. It's been a couple years, probably 6-7 years since I've gotten to ride on an engine or a truck. So that is a whole nother experience, right? And somebody was just talking to me about that today. Do you miss it? I said, absolutely. I said, that is a really fantastic part of what we do because somebody calls you and we're there to help them solve their problem.
Yeah, because I heard you tell a really poignant story about, you know, obviously it's the safety and the physical response to a fire, et cetera, but sitting with someone who has experienced something traumatic and just being with them. And I heard that you were telling a story about an elderly woman who had lost her husband. Right.
So yeah, if you're a firefighter, people always say, what's the hardest call you've ever been on? And they want to hear about the biggest, baddest brush fire you've ever been on, or the biggest, baddest, you know, structure fire that you've been on. And those are a lot. I mean, those are very challenging, both mentally and physically. But people are always surprised when I say the calls that really get me are the ones when you have the ability to connect with either the patient or a family member and really make a difference. And that may be holding an elderly woman's hand who just lost her husband or spouse of 60 years and connecting with her and spending a little extra time with her. And then those are the calls that stick with me. It's not the big fire that we might have gone on. We were on it for a couple hours and went back to the station and that was it. It was really about how we're able to connect with the people, with the community of LA.
Well, if people want to get more information about their own safety or the potential of being somebody that provides the opportunity to help others, how can they get in touch and what should they look for?
The easiest way is just our website. It's LAFD.org. We've got a fantastic webpage. It's got the preparedness piece on there. It's got all of our different areas within the department, if they even from the recruiting side, with our hiring process, but that's where most of the information is. It's an easy way to get a hold of the fire department as well, and that would probably be where I'd push people to.
Okay, let me know when you legally change your middle name to Trailblazer.
Thank you.
It was great chatting with you.
Thank you very much.
And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.